doing in week 5 of the course is we're moving from mindfulness of chitta to mindfulness of dharmas. So this is the main thing we're going to be doing tonight, mindfulness of dharmas. And reaction practice really straddles this kind of like the two. Reaction practice really straddles mindfulness of our thoughts, our narratives, our theories about life, and it also straddles the mindfulness of dharmas, which is maybe I'll come on to a little bit about what it is in a moment. What I wanted to do before that was just to bring us back to week 1. Again, kind of starting again with the samsaric trend and the nirvanic trend. So as I said a little bit about in the first half, samsara is, we can talk about it in terms of our habitual reactions, the sort of habitual way that we are in the world, that kind of keeps us a little bit like those like pinball machines, you know? You know those little pinball machines? You can just sort of like imagine the ball goes kind of like pinging from like one bit to the other. And often I think like if we're unaware in life, particularly busy London life, that's what happens, yeah? That's what happens. We kind of like ping from one situation to another, one difficult situation to another, one unsatisfactory meeting to another, one difficult conversation to another. And we kind of keep doing that. And sometimes we can feel like that happens to us, but as we're trying to explore in the course, that's not really quite true. We kind of actually do it. We kind of actually do it through our sort of habitual ways of being. Last week, Maitra Bandhu introduced a particular Buddhist term called samskaras. So this is, I suppose it's a particular way of talking about habits, but it's kind of like habits of our mind. We sort of wear grooves in our mind. When this happens, we go into this mode, yeah? So when, I was just thinking, like a particularly unhelpful samskara could be when we get into a difficult conversation. One of the things I'm starting to learn about myself is when I get into a difficult conversation, I'm in a meeting where I'm just sort of feeling a bit challenged. What I can do is just kind of go passive. I go passive and I just kind of like go a little bit monosyllabic and kind of like slightly check out, just sort of withdraw and sort of protect myself. People recognize this, yeah? So that's one of the things I've started to learn about myself. And actually, this is just a habitual way of reacting to the world. And so that's my particular sort of samskara, and so I'm starting to sort of get hold of it. But samskaras can be really, really interesting. We talk about samskaras, talk about our habits as if it's a bad thing. We want to get rid of our habits. But actually, if we really sort of understand habit, we can sort of start to realize that what can happen is that we can cultivate good habits, yeah? We can cultivate good habits, sort of using the law of habitual behavior to sort of cultivate more expansive ways of being, more sort of habits that sort of take us into a different kind of mode, a more creative kind of mode, a wiser, more loving mode, yeah? And if we do that, we're sort of starting to open ourselves up to the sort of the nirvanic currents, the sort of like the currents of wisdom, and it can often just sort of does feel like that it's a current that's a bit like the wind is sort of behind us in a way. It often does feel like that in a certain sort of way it's a bit like having a muse, or like just the wind sort of blowing through us, sort of a sense of inspiration and a creativity that comes from outside of us, yeah? So it's not sort of personal in a particular sort of way. So what we're doing in this part of the course is that we're really, really trying to step from the samsaric way of being into the nirvanic way of being. And a lot of that is just working with mind. It's working with mind. And it's working with mind in a sort of moment-to-moment sort of way. Yeah, it's working with mind in a moment-to-moment sort of way. So, mindfulness of dharmas. Like dharmas is a little bit like chitta in that it's a word, it's a Pali word. It's quite difficult to translate, and it's mainly difficult to translate because it's got quite a number of translations. It's one of the sort of, I suppose I don't know if this is true, but particularly, but imagine like it's probably one of the words in Buddhism that's got the most sort of vastest range of meanings. So it can mean anything from the Buddhist teaching to the nature of reality to your mental states or the states of sort of like atomic states in a way. It's got lots and lots of different kinds of meanings. But in this course for this week, when we talk about mindfulness of dharmas, what we're really trying to say is bringing the teachings to mind. Yeah. So for Buddhists, it would mean bringing the Buddhist teachings to mind. You don't have to be Buddhist to practice this particularly. So what we're saying that the mindfulness of dharmas is in those particular moments, just bringing the teachings to mind, so that we can do what's most authentic, do what's most in our best interest for authentic happiness. Okay, so doing what's best in our best interest, bringing the teachings to mind that will give us the biggest sort of perspective, that where we can just then act and do what's in our best interest in a true way, yeah, in a true way, in a wise way, in a sort of interconnected way, in a loving way. So, don't know about you, but when I first started meditating, I realized that I had emotions. I didn't quite realize that before. I was just like sort of started to get in touch with my emotions, and then I sort of realized that there are times when I'm happy, and there are times when I'm sad, and for quite a long time actually, I didn't quite know how I got from one state of happiness to a state of upset. It's sort of like I've kind of just felt like I had two modes. Fine and not fine, and sometimes I was fine and sometimes I was not fine, and I didn't quite know how the two things sort of joined up. And I'm sure they must have joined up because it was me, but I just couldn't quite work out how I got from one way to another. And I think what we're trying to do with mindfulness is we're just trying to like unpick what it is to be okay or happy or wise, and unpick what it is to be upset or sad or angry or reactive. Just unpick that a little bit. And so that's the first step. Just trying to like just kind of like try to understand a bit what we're like. And I'm sure a lot of you have really started to do that. You know, once you start paying attention to Vedana, once you start paying attention to the narratives, once you start sort of reducing input, reducing the distraction in your life, you'll already have started to notice that. Oh, I've got emotions, and oh, I'm in like quite a lot of different states, and the sort of emotional range is actually much bigger than I thought it was. And then you can sort of start to catch hold of why you might be in a particular state, what sort of caused that particular state to happen. And I think a number of you are starting to see as well that it is kind of like our own doing. It is kind of like your own doing, my own doing, yeah? So what we're trying to do in this part of the course is we're trying to sort of actively cultivate positive states of being. Yeah, we're actually trying to actively cultivate positive states of being. When we find ourselves in negative states, what can often happen is that we make unwise choices. Yeah. Sort of, you know, we talked a lot about washing up in this course. You know, when you're in a little bit of a bad mood, you know, you just sort of crash around doing the washing up in a really resentful way, and sometimes it can really, really affect the atmosphere. You know this when somebody else is doing it. You walk into a room and there's an atmosphere, and the atmosphere is like a big, quite stinky cloud. There's like sort of stinky cloud of resentment you can walk into. And really, when we get into those states ourselves, when we get into these reactive, unhappy, angry, blaming states, actually the thing that is going on is that we hurt ourselves the most, yeah? It's really not in our best interest to work ourselves up like that. It's really not in our best interest to be doing the washing up in a bad mood. It's really not in our best interest to be flying into a rage. It's really not in our best interest to be like barging into people on the tube. You know, it really, really isn't. So what we're trying to do is to actively cultivate more positive mental states, because what happens when we're in a positive mental state, when we act from kindness, when we act from a place of just really acknowledging somebody else's humanity, or even just acknowledging our own, that we're not just what we do. We're not just our own utility. Other people are more than their usefulness to us. When we sort of start to act from those places, act from a place of kindness and wisdom and grown-upness, we do just make better, wiser choices. And these actions, whether it's a thought, whether it's in speech, whether it's an actual act in the world. Buddhism doesn't actually in a certain sort of way, doesn't really distinguish mental acts from physical acts that much. What then happens is that the world sort of opens up to us. We kind of get into more expansive, more creative states. And these states sort of can unfold. Don't know if you ever got into a good conversation. The conversations can just then unfold, and even after the conversation ends, if you have a really, really sort of like inspired conversation with a good friend, it's almost like it can sort of infuse the rest of your day, the rest of your evening. It can even sort of like infuse the rest of the week. Sometimes listening to a really good Dharma talk can do the same. It sort of just expands and unfolds, and it's sort of really creative. I often imagine that that's what enlightenment must be like, just this infinitely energetic, creative states of mind. And that's what we're trying to do, is to sort of step into that a little bit more, step into that with each and every moment, yeah? So what we're trying to do is just to really do what's in our best interest. So, let me just think about what I want to say next. Okay, so maybe I'll just say a little bit about what we might want to do to sort of, what we might want to reflect about, to unpick a little bit the states of mind that we can get into. So, one way you could think about how we are is to talk about craving and hatred and ignorance. So the forces of craving, the forces of hatred, and the forces of ignorance. And mostly when we're in our habitual reactions, when we're sort of like going round and round, it'll be one of the three, or two of the three, or all three together, yeah? Craving, hatred, and ignorance. So when we're in the grip of craving, when we're in the grip of desire, I don't know, I'm sure like everyone in the room's been in love before. Even if you've never been in love, you might know what it's like to really want a Mars bar or a Snickers. You know what craving is. But maybe like love, if you know what like being infatuated is like, maybe that's like a much stronger response. You might want to think about that a bit more. We know what it's like, and often what happens when we're in the grip of infatuation, the grip of being in love, is that we sort of edit out all the bad bits, and we only sort of remember the good bits, yeah? We sort of edit out, the sort of, I suppose, the faults, the less sort of attractive bits about whoever it is. We can sort of just sort of focus on the things that are really, really lovely. And often, over time, if we do get into a relationship, we're so lucky to get into a relationship, that sort of like positive projection will sort of diminish over time. But that's sort of like quite a gross example. But actually, we do this all the time for the things that we want really. The things that we really, really want, the things that we sort of like hanker after, the things that we long for, the things that we crave for, we do that. We sort of edit out the negative consequences, and we only just sort of focus on the positive. So it could be a person that we're in love with. They might have a partner. We can sort of like completely edit that bit out. We might have a partner. We have completely edit that out. Can think about like the job, the promotion that we really want. It's like this amazing job with like more money, more respect, more kudos in a way, and completely forget that will actually really take us away from our families, really take us away from our children, really take us away from our partner. Yeah. Sure, you can think about lots of things like food is one as well. Anyone who's ever been overweight or underweight will sort of tell you about that. So when we're in the grip of desire, we sort of distort reality, sort of see reality as really positive, see all the positive sides. When we're in the grip of irritation and hatred and ill will, the opposite can happen. Yeah, the opposite can happen. I'm sure like I'm not the only person in this room that gets annoyed with people. I'm sure like other people get annoyed with people. And you know what it's like when you just like have this person in your life that you don't like? It's really hard to think about their positive qualities. It really, really is, They sort of they bring you a cup of tea. Yeah, that doesn't matter. They were only doing it because, they're getting everyone else a cup of tea. Or, it's really, when we're in this grip of like ill will, it is really difficult to see the positive. Again, we sort of distort reality to sort of suit our narrative, suit our theory about the world. Yeah. And this is important. This is really, really important, the way we sort of distort reality. It's one of the reasons why we teach the Metta-bhavana practice. This thing about doing the fourth stage of the Metta-bhavana practice, where we bring loving kindness to a person who is difficult in our lives. Often, when I teach it, all we're trying to do in that first bit of the fourth stage, bringing the difficult person to mind, is just to see them a little bit more as a whole person. For years and years and years, I used to put my ex-boss in this particular stage, like really a long time. And most of the time, all I could bring to mind was that he was a father. He is a father, and I was just trying to imagine what he might be like to his children, yeah, and what his children might sort of think about him. Yeah, I could only think about, I won't tell you about all the bits I don't like, but do you see what I mean? Do you see what I mean? It's very, very difficult. The sort of default response to things that we don't like or people that we don't like is that we just sort of see the bad. And then for the things that we hanker after, we long for, we just sort of see the good. And then there's this thing about ignorance. I was thinking about this a little bit in the sense of that we can be sort of willfully ignorant. We can sort of be willfully sort of sleepwalking through life. Probably most of us don't do this all the time, but we might do this sometimes. I was sort of confessing to my Tribandhu that one thing that can happen for me is I call my mom. We have quite long phone conversations. And I call her, and I'm also sort of playing a little game on my phone at the same time. And you go okay, oh yeah. And then, that's the kind of conversation that I have with my mom. That is a kind of willful ignorance. That is a kind of sort of shutting down towards love and expansiveness. And actually, what can happen then is I just sort of miss quite a lot of the conversation. Actually, I sort of kid myself sometimes. I am paying attention, but I do actually miss quite a lot of the detail of the conversation. I'm sure you can see how that's really not in my best interest. Really not in the best interest for my relationship with my mother. It's not really in the best interest for my relationship as a person. Yeah. Yeah, and I was thinking after that, I was thinking that I'm sure that is what happens when, you see a whole tube carriage full of people and everyone's like this, like that. I'm sure that is, this is kind of like shutting down to each other, to reality, to how things are in the world. Yeah. Okay. So what we're trying to do in those moments when we're in the grip of desire or hatred, or when we're sort of like, certainly making a choice to shut down. What we're trying to do in those moments, practicing mindfulness of Dharma, is to bring into mind whatever you can remember of the teaching of Buddhism, or anything that we've learned in this course, to bring to mind in those moments, at those moments, what's going to sort of stop your world from narrowing, and to get you into a bigger perspective. So when we're in love, when we're in sort of like when we're sort of full of craving and infatuation, what can happen is that our world narrows. It narrows into that chocolate bar, that promotion, that person. It also happens, that is what happens when we're in ill will and hatred and jealousy. Our whole mind is filled with that one thing. Again, the kind of walls of our mind close down. You can sort of see how that might be, when you're sort of like willfully ignorant, sort of willfully stepping into sleepwalking, stepping into numbing out. Our world collapses, yeah? So what we're trying to do in those moments is then to bring to mind whatever it is that's going to do the opposite, to expand our perspective. So we take the biggest possible perspective, so that we can then make a choice, a conscious choice, to act in our own best interest. Yeah. So that's what we're trying to be practicing this week. And the thing is that Buddhism's really practical. The thing about Buddhism is that it's really, really practical. And this might work for some of you, it might not work for some of you, but what Buddhism offers is a set of training precepts, so a set of training precepts that act as a bit of a guide, a little bit of a guide to looking at our mental states and to look at our behavior. And you can think of these training precepts as how somebody who is sort of fully in the stream of the nirvanic current, fully in the sort of trend of wisdom and compassion, how they would naturally act in the world. Yeah. And the details are all in the book, but I'll just sort of say that the training precepts are a training in kindness and generosity, simplicity and contentment. They are a training precept in being authentic and honest and truthful. And they're also a training precept in being aware and awake and mindful. So that's how a person who is wise and kind would just sort of naturally behave in the world. And I personally find these sort of guides really, really helpful. I find the precepts really, really helpful because they're quite objective and they're practical. So what that means for me, I guess, is that I can sort of stop worrying about the irrational guilt and to actually focus on things that would be truly helpful. So I can sort of stop worrying about all those times. I don't know if you get these like social awkward moments, those social faux pas when you kind of think like, oh no, I've underdressed or overdressed for the occasion. And like the precepts will just all say like, that's not a problem. That's not a problem. You don't have to worry about it. It might be slightly embarrassing, but it's not an ethical issue. But telling white lies to sort of like make yourself a little bit more glamorous than you actually are, a little bit more important than you actually are, that is a bit of a problem. Yeah, that is a bit of a problem. I think before I started practicing ethics, I used to kind of lump those two things like together. Wearing the wrong clothes and telling white lies. Maybe you don't, but do you see what I mean? The precepts sort of act as a little bit of a guide, yeah? So it'll act as a bit of a guide. So I find them quite helpful. You'll just have to see for yourself. Have a little read in the book. It's quite clear. And just to say as well about the precepts, that I think sometimes we can sort of think about ethics. Pranyamanas was sort of talking about a course that we run on practical ethics, and the course is called after the book. That's the handbook of the course, not about being good. But I think for me, like that doesn't really do it for me. I think my main sort of thing about practicing the precepts, why I wasn't that interested to start off with, was that I just didn't want to be a boring person. I didn't want to be like a person with who was like a bit like goody two shoes. Not because I didn't want to be goody two shoes, but just because I didn't want to be boring. But actually, the precepts, if we're kinder, sort of warmer, more authentic, we're more awake, what happens is that we're actually warmer. We're actually more. We can sort of get more excited about things because we're not sort of like pulled in sort of different directions all the time. We can just sort of be more passionate. We can sort of be more ourselves. We're just more confident and true individuals, I guess. Yeah. So one last thing about practicing mindfulness of Dhammas, practicing bringing the teachings to mind in the moment, is that we really need to catch the moment, yeah? So we really, really need to catch the moment that we're about to fly into a rage, the moment that we're about to start writing a sarcastic email back, the moment we're just about to open that app that's going to take us to, I don't know, eBay or Tinder, or my favorite thing, which is 2 dots. The moment we're just going to sort of sleepwalk into life, that's when we've got to catch the moment and bring the teachings to mind. What is going to open up our perspective again? So, I don't know, probably you might not have heard about this, but there's this lovely sort of Greek mythical character called Ocasio. And it's a bit like a demon spirit, and it's a demon spirit of chance and luck. So it's called Ocasio, and this character is, it's depicted on its tiptoes because it's always running. And it's also completely naked, and it's got no hair at the back of its head. So all it's got is a little forelock. So it's a god of chance and luck, and the sort of phrase that came to mind is catching the moment by its forelock, or catching the occasion by its forelock. And that's where it comes from, this sort of demon spirit called Ocasio. So if you want to catch the moment, if you want to catch the occasion, you have to catch it by the front. It's only got this little bit of hair here, and it zips by. And you're not going to catch it from behind because it's naked and doesn't have any hair behind it. So you have to sort of really catch it. Anyway. Obviously, so you might want to bring that to mind when you do your reaction practice. It's like, okay, the moment's gonna zip by, but catch it now. Okay. Yeah. So I think we come to the point of homework. So homework. See if you can continue with your mindful walks. Again, a bit like last week, really notice the narratives. Like when you're in a mindful walk, see if you can really notice what sort of state of mind that you're in. And then from that state of mind, just really notice the underlying theory, the underlying sort of narrative that's driving that state of mind. See if you can meditate every day if you can. If you haven't been meditating every day, so maybe you've been meditating once or twice, see if you can just make it 3 times or 4 times, just sort of increase it by 1. It's really, really important to meditate. I don't know, I just can't sort of emphasize that enough. It's very, very difficult to do mindfulness practice without meditation. And also, if you've been doing 10 minutes, see if you can sort of arrange your life a little bit so that you can do maybe 15 minutes or 20 minutes. See if you can slightly increase the length of the meditation. Mainly so that you can also sort of include that reflection on reaction in your meditation practice. Maybe towards the end of your practice, you might just want to bring whatever reaction from the previous day or that particular day to mind, and see if you can sort of get underneath it, start to really reflect on what's being threatened, where can you feel it, what's concrete and what's just a story, and see if you can just sort of explore that without particularly trying to reach like a theoretical conclusion. See if you can just sort of explore around it and be really, really soft. This thing of like doing reaction practice, you do need to be in a fairly robust and positive state of mind to do it. It is quite a serious practice, and you do need to be fairly positive to do it. So connected to the reaction practice, I'd like all of you, if you can, to do one of the exercises in the book, which is, Maharaja calls it the Fearless Ethical Life Inventory, the Fearless Life Inventory. I really like it because it says fearless. It's got that, sort of like little challenge in there. And it's just sort of like having a good, honest look at one's life. And you don't have to show it to anyone. You don't have to sort of check in about it in your home groups. But I think if you sort of want to start to get more serious about your life, I'm not even talking about spiritual life. I am just talking about life in general. We do need to have that quality of fearless inquiry. What is it that we're actually doing? So do the fearless life inventory if you can. And then the other thing that I'd like to add, so this is item number 4. Item number 4 is to see if you can take on a personal precept. In fact, take on 2 personal precepts. So if you've already been doing your reaction practice for a week, you might start to notice that there's a thing that you do. There's a flashpoint in your life. And you might want to take on a particular sort of practice that will sort of help you in that moment. So I was saying in the home group that I was in that one of the things I'm starting to notice is that when I'm in a meeting, I go passive. And I'm in a meeting where I don't like the way it's going. When the discussion is going somewhere, but I don't like it where it's going, I sort of withdraw. So one precept for me could be that I'm not going to withdraw. I'm actually going to sort of say, can I just sort of say a little bit about how I am and what I'm thinking? So that's going to be my precept. So you might want to think, if your thing is sort of banging off that email that you're going to regret, you might take on a precept to just sort of say you're going to draft your emails and send them out in batches so that you can have to think about it, before you hit send. If your thing is barging into people on the tube, you might just want to decide that your precept is going to be, I'm going to get out of the house 5 minutes before, so I'm not in a rush. So then I'm not going to sort of have this attitude of get out of my way when I step onto the central line. So it sounds think about what precept that you're going to take on, and you're just going to keep that precept for the rest of the week. So in addition to that sort of negative precept, it would be really good if you take on to do something positive. like something that will actually, not in reaction to something difficult, something that will be, that will bring about a more expansive state of mind. And for most of us, that would probably be to do with other people. So you might want to take on the precept of being more generous in quite a specific way. You might just want to say like, okay, for the rest of the week, I'm going to offer to make tea at least twice a day for my team, yeah. Or I'm going to just hoover the stairs. I'm just going to do something that's positive and generous, something that will just immediately take you into a more connected state of being. So maybe get back into pairs, 2s or 3s, and see if you can tell your partner about the negative precept that you're going to take on and the positive precept that you're going to take on.